Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. This is an introduction episode for you. If you missed this last Friday's episode, you should go back and listen to that one first. The last practice underwater with Suzanne Rassy. When I was recording this, I thought this one was going to be first and the practice underwater was going to come this Friday. So if you hear me reference in this episode, like, oh, there's an interview upcoming with George and Matt and Suzanne, that actually already happened. So go back and listen to it. I am so excited to be working with Suzanne. You're going to hear who she is and what she's about in this interview. I won't go on and on about it right now. Good things to come. Here we go with Suzanne Rassy. I have a good friend and special guest with us today, a new member of the Shared Practices team. We have Suzanne Rassy with us of ROI Dental Coaching, now the Director of Coaching at Shared Practices. Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Richard. This is so exciting. I feel like it's been a long time in the making. So this day's finally here.
We have been talking and planning and building behind the scenes. We had, worldwide pandemic, put things on delay. It's been an exciting timeline, and we're really excited for the things that are to come. And we'll sneak preview a little bit of that today. But later on this week, we're going to have multiple episodes with you and the Pursuit of Ownership and Practice Underwater. And we're going to get a little bit more of what is to come for Shared Practices and coaching in particular. So thank you for being here. We're so excited.
Well, thank you, Richard. I am excited as well. I'm honored actually to be part of it. And, the journey's beginning. So I'm really excited.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about you a little bit. So first off, you are in the Arizona area right now, near George, near where I went to dental school. The beautiful place that 5 months of the year you feel like the sun is 40 feet in the air, and then the rest of the year it's absolutely beautiful and 70 degrees. Love it. I miss it. Are you from Arizona originally? I can't remember.
I'm actually from Montreal, from Canada.
Right.
So Arizona is paradise.
I don't know what it is with Canadians in Arizona. Like we've experienced the winters and we realize like, oh my goodness, life can be this miserable. There's got to be something better. And then Arizona comes along, and Alberta in particular, where I'm from Calgary. It's like a straight shot south from Alberta to Arizona. And when the recession hit, the real estate recession in late 2000s, was right when I started dental school. I started dental school in 2011, and I bought a house in Vistancia up in the northwest corner. It was like Arrested Development, where they have the one house that's built and then all the foreclosed lots that like never got built around it. That was where we lived while we were going to dental school. But my parents also bought a house in the same neighborhood as their winter home. And so during dental school, they would fly down and we'd swim together and hang out together. So you've made the permanent switch to being an Arizonan at this point.
Yes, it's been, I want to say 15 years. Yeah.
Okay.
And you were talking about your parents. I just dropped them off at the airport yesterday. They were here. And, we won't go into those details, but COVID hit and they were here. And what better place to be stuck in than Arizona?
Right. Yeah. And that's, man, I think retirement someday, it's a beautiful place. And there's a reason why people just kind of gradually flock down there. So
You bet.
well, let's talk about your career in dentistry. So, how did you start off initially getting into dentistry and working with dentists?
Well, Richard, I want to start off by sharing with the listeners. I think it's important that they kind of hear behind the scenes. What I've been telling you guys is that, everything that I have done really, I feel like is leading up to where we are today together at Shared Practices. So, I feel like the audience needs to hear that too. I think they get to know me by my sharing that.
Absolutely.
But I started as a dental assistant, a pretty common trajectory for coaches. And, I loved every minute of it, became treatment coordinator, financial coordinator, managed an office. But when I was training dental assistants, that's the point where I realized that my mentoring and my coaching was really a passion. I was helping dental assistants grow, and I just really loved that. I connected well with that. So at that point in time, I got recruited by a large consulting company, Mercer Advisors.
Okay.
who I think you're familiar with, right?
Yeah, no, I remember hearing about Mercer, between Dentaltown and other sources, and I knew of them as a financial advisor, and putting together financial plans for dentists to be able to retire someday and build up some assets. Um, and so when you mentioned Mercer, I was like, "Oh, yeah, they have been helping dentists for a long time." And it seems like there was a period of time where they did both financial advising and consulting in dental offices. So tell me about that.
Absolutely. Well, it started off as a financial company, and when Imtiaz Manji joined the company, he kind of brought over some consultants and developed the consulting side or the coaching side of Mercer Advisors. So there really was a strong relationship between the two. Um, at some point, we worked on that relationship even further, and that was a great opportunity to kind of connect doctors with both sides. Is it are you preparing? Are you financially preparing for the future? What does your vision look like? And if you want to retire within the next couple of years, can you financially afford that? So it just made sense to marry the two.
No, and the incentive lines up there where um, they want you to be successful in a dental office if there's a consulting and a financial advising company kinda doing both under one umbrella, it's like, if your practice is more successful, then you have more assets to build up and invest and then eventually be able to retire sooner, and it sounds like it at the time, it offered a comprehensive picture of like, okay, they're looking at your practice very much from what's the value of your practice and what's that going to look like when you sell it, and that compared to your other assets compared to the market. And um, so in my mind I could see that there would be some synergy as a coach kind of understanding their goals in terms of, do they want more time off? Are they looking for consulting and coaching so they can be in the office less, versus are they looking at making more money, versus are they looking at retiring sooner? um, how did that help you as a coach understand what their goals were and how to get them there?
Yeah. Well, it has everything to do with really looking at the doctor's vision, right? You mentioned, is it time or is it money? And I think one of the things that I really appreciated about my relationship with my clients was that um, creating some success really does create some financial wealth as well. And so I felt like I was protecting doctors from maybe expenditures that weren't necessarily needed, but
Mm.
with success comes some excitement. And were they also keeping in mind that these funds should be and could be for the future? So I enjoyed the opportunity to kind of look at things from both sides.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing that comes to mind right now is, I think I've shared this on another episode recently, so I apologize. But there was a patient in the chair as COVID was kind of breaking news, and we were starting to like shut down the office. I was seeing patients, and he said that he does refinances on practice loans, and he had a dental couple who had a collective like $1.7 million of personal debt, and 900,000 of that was credit cards alone. And there can sometimes in dentistry be this like lure of success where there's all this money coming in, so it's always gonna be that way, and we'll just finance everything, and more money goes out the door than coming in. Whereas having a comprehensive plan, would kind of be satisfying, because it's like, we know that the success that they're building in their practice is then being captured and put towards their ultimate goals, rather than being squandered or misappropriated or overspent or whatever. So I can see some fun synergy there that was available to you.
Right, right. And the young doctors program, for example, getting them at that level, which is a lot of times how shared practices helps doctors as well at that level. So being able to just give them some tips and tricks right from the get go, so that they avoid some of those pitfalls, I think is so valuable.
No, absolutely. And one thing I wanna make clear here is that shared practices is not moving into the financial advising world, or of mixing advising, in a coaching aspect and a consulting aspect within your practice with your eventual plans. However, understanding what someone's vision is crucial to the direction that a practice is going. And so I think that's one of the things you absolutely bring to the table is a comprehensive picture of what do you really want and how can we get you there
Right.
versus let's just come in and tweak your practice and change some things for the heck of changing it.
Right.
Um, so while you were there, not only were you advising and working with dentists one on one, you also had experience uh, training up other coaches, and other consultants. Tell me about that. How did you get into that role, and what was fun about that for you in terms of not just being working with dentists directly, but building up a team?
Right. So, Mercer Advisors was growing at that period of time, and when I got recruited, it was kind of on the on the ground floor, basically with a couple of consultants, and we grew that quite a bit and pretty quickly as well. So, I became a leader of a team of 46 coaches, and
Mm,
I was kind of a coach to the coaches, if you will. Did a lot of the quality assurance with doctors, and kind of that's how my role evolved. Um, and then the 360 program was born, and that program was really launched to help again on the financial side, the transition side, and the coaching side. And so on the coaching side, I developed a program that was on site, a combination of on site consulting and a phone coaching component that supported that. So it was boots on the ground in offices across the country, and that phone coaching component was developed to kind of support that. A couple of years later, then Mercer was sold to Patterson Dental. So Mercer Advisors became a component of Patterson Dental on the coaching side only,
okay,
and myself and another person went along with that sale basically.
gotcha.
So my next gig became working very closely hand in hand with the territory reps at Patterson. And we developed a business and dentistry program to really help the reps understand how they could partner with their clients, not just sell them sundries, sell them equipment, but also partner with them and even help, for example, with some analysis of practices, or at least to help them with certain tools or tips, tricks, as they were facing certain hardships or challenges. Um, at that point, I kind of missed being hands on directly with the doctors. I
Sure.
missed that part of it. I felt like there was a layer that I really didn't have a lot of control over. It
Sure.
was more, the relationship that the Patterson rep had. And I felt like the program was a little bit of a byproduct. So I really missed that.
Mm.
So I developed my own thing after that, and grew my own company basically until I was approached by shared practices.
Well, so you now have been in hundreds of offices across the country. You've seen dentists and helped them and their teams, trained them and their teams, worked with them on their systems, on their protocols, and on leadership, on culture, on all of these things. Um, and this is something that, frankly, George and Matt and I lack. If we're going to be honest here, is that while George, was compulsively looking at hundreds of offices in his 2nd and 3rd year of dental school, from an acquisition standpoint on behalf of others and for himself, um, we have not physically been in that volume of offices. And we do not have that same depth of experience, in person with teams, with all of the different weird situations that you find dental offices in. So we find incredible value in what you bring to the table, um, because of that experience, because you've worked with and love working with dentists and teams one on one. Um, for you, what are some of the things that you have loved about coaching and working with dentists and working with teams?
We obviously have an opportunity here, a unique opportunity, as you were mentioning, to support doctors from every angle. You guys, Matt and George, with the doctor side of it, and myself with the how to's. And I think you alluded to the fact, Richard, that there, is an opportunity there because of the lack of that. And so, the best part about the coaching is the opportunity that I'm working with the doctor and the team to kind of teach them how to fish, not necessarily fish for them.
Right.
And so doctors, like I said, Matt and Richard and George, you guys all have the opportunity to work with them from a doctor standpoint. But the how tos are I think what I bring to the table here. So that's an exciting part.
No, absolutely. And one thing that we have talked about before, and I you probably talk with George and Matt later on this week about the same topic. Um, the one disadvantage that we see to in-office coaching is that sometimes it becomes easy to become reliant on someone like you, that it's like, okay, Suzanne, next time Suzanne comes in, she's gonna address this issue, like, "Oh, I don't have to worry about it because Suzanne has this." And that's why, like you said, that teaching people to fish rather than doing the fishing for them, um, is the challenge of leadership and development and coaching and consulting that we are excited about at Shared Practices, is not that dentists delegate the leadership of their office, but they truly own that role, and can learn from and work hand in hand with someone with experience, with metrics, and develop a skill set of leadership and running a business. Um, and that's what we're so excited about moving forward with you. Um, has that ever occurred? Am I speaking out of turn by saying that there are offices that sometimes become dependent on an in-office coach?
No, I think you're exactly right, Richard. Especially when you're regularly in their office, I think it's the lines get blurred, and on both sides, the doctors kind of feel like the coach becomes more of a team member.
Mm,
More of a, hey, fix this, and the office manager kind of takes care of it. And I think that's where the lines get blurred, but I think on the coach's side as well. So that remote relationship really encourages the coach to teach the doctor about how to be a great leader in their practice, and then pass that on, kind of develop other leaders within the practice as well.
that's fantastic. No, and we've got a lot more of that coming. Something that you and I have talked about here, and we're excited about today, is talking specifically about change within an office. So this season is about leadership, culture, and change. I feel like we've hit on the leadership, we've hit on culture. We haven't really dove super deep on specifics of change within a dental office. And literally that's your job, is you come in as a coach and you look at what is going on here and what, if anything, needs to change. And if something didn't need to change, they probably wouldn't have hired you or reached out to you in the first place. So how do you go about diagnosing? It's like we come in, we take radiographs, we ask the patients about stuff, we look in the mouth, do an oral exam, we come up with a diagnosis. What are the tools for you that, if you have a client who wants to engage with you and they're like, here, they think they have a problem. And I don't know how common that is, where someone comes in and they say, "Hey, this is my problem with my practice. Can you fix this?" Is that always the problem that needs addressed? Talk to us about that.
That's a good point that you're making. At times it is. Some doctors know exactly where the issue may lie, and others think, oh, just fix the team and it'll be fixed, right? I'm sure you've heard that before. So I think it's I see myself as an agent of change, and I think I kind of press the issue there, or accelerate the issue. Yes, of course, we're getting a call, out of desperation,
Sure.
sometimes help.
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes the doctor is just not happy with status quo and not able to really, really pinpoint or put his or her finger on what the issue is. So they need some help with co-discovery. And I'm glad you mentioned radiographs, and that's kind of how you diagnose in a mouth. And as coaches, we do the same thing. We really
Mm.
diagnose a practice the same way. What focus areas, what quote unquote quadrants are we going to start with? I like to look at the practice that way. And then co-discovery is basically the first step. So when I sit down with a doctor, and kind of map out what that treatment plan is going to look like, and how we're communicating that to the team, change is a lot easier for some than it is for others. So I think just taking that leap of faith, calling, reaching out, I think that's basically the first step, right?
Step number 1 is saying, "Hey, there needs to be change here," and
Yep.
recognizing that, and I wonder how often you've probably also had clients who they think the owner thinks there needs to be change and no one else thinks there needs to be change, or there's disagreement about the change that needs to occur. Um, are do you have any specifics in terms of that co-discovery process of, what are you looking at to decide, "Hey, where is the area of greatest growth, or what is holding us back here in this office?"
And sometimes there are multiple factors
Mm,
that are inhibiting the practice from moving forward. Whether it's people, whether it's patient flow, whether it's a combination of a number of things. But it's important to kind of take a step back and to realize that change can't happen all at once, right? We can't fix all of the things that are happening in the practice, and what areas of focus trickle down to other areas. Um, Doctors are conscious a lot of times that something has to happen, but like I said, they can't pinpoint what the area is. Um, I think acknowledging that there's going to be some discomfort there. We're going to make some changes, and it's going to be a little uncomfortable. Then you start to open up that discussion about discomfort, and then you start to open up what possible barriers are preventing the doctor and the team from making certain changes if they knew those changes already existed, or to getting to that outcome. So, I think that's an important part. Is it's with the planning, with the diagnosing, and the sitting down and really mapping out, okay, this is what you want, this is what you told me your vision was, what are the steps that you've taken already to try to get there, and what other steps are we going to agree on. Maybe we choose the top 2 or the top 3 and start to work on those areas.
okay. So what I'm hearing is you're you're collecting a lot of data from the practice in terms of, what's your journey been? What have you changed? What have you improved? What have you worked on? What do you think are your top needs? Are there some other things that some of that's subjective, some of that is like, "Hey, here's what we think is wrong with our practice." Are there other key metrics that you're looking at, or do you need, how many metrics? Is it like you're looking at 20 things, you're looking at 100 things, you're looking at 5 things, are there certain things that you just need to know upfront about this practice in terms of KPIs, certain metrics to be able to accurately diagnose? I'm putting you on the spot here, but I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like, for you, what has the process been to say, this is where we're gonna start, and what's the data, what's the input that you need to arrive at that decision?
I think one of the big factors here, and you hit the nail on the head when we were talking about vision, you basically are looking at the vision, and then as you work your way backwards, then you're looking at certain metrics. Does that meet what it is that the outcome is the doctor's wanting to achieve? So if I take a step back and look at, I addressed quadrant dentistry. Like I look at, you take radiographs, look at the entire mouth, and then may make a determination on maybe a priority, what area to work on, right? In a practice, we do the same thing. So there are certain metrics like patient base, whether that's existing patients or new patients. What's the patient base in the practice? What does the team look like to support that patient base? What does the facility look like to support that?
Mm,
And then the schedule. So those are certain, just certain baseline factors that I'm looking at to kind of make a determination on whether or not what the doctor has been doing is achieving the vision.
okay, cool. So, and then from there, we're looking at really specific, if we're talking about scheduling, if we're talking about recall, if we're talking about new patients, we're gonna dive into a whole different set of metrics around that one area to figure out, where are we trending? What are the opportunities here? Are there are there any common things that just everyone struggles with, or that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. There was a time where I went into a physical therapist. I hurt my back trying to do some kettlebell swings and, just tweaked my lower back somehow. I couldn't figure out what it was. Um, and he was like, "You are tight in areas that a lot of people are tight in." There were certain things he looked for
Mm.
and immediately was like, "Okay, you've got issues here, 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 and here. Here's a set of exercises that can help you, and here's another specific set of exercises for what you've got going on." Um, are there some commonalities, or is each practice, broken and in need of improvement in its own unique way?
I would answer yes to both of those questions
Okay.
because I think there are very unique situations in practices, and that's kind of one of the things that I appreciate about what we're doing at Shared Practices is there's no cookie cutter approach.
Mm,
It is very much a customized approach. But at the same time, there are some common blind spots that, some weak areas that we see in practices that we can hone in on. And, sometimes just tweaking some of those areas make a huge difference. But, some common things like when I go into practices, it is more, especially with the front office, or when I'm talking with a front office team, what I'm finding is they kind of know that these things have to be done, like reactivation, appointing a head, those common things, but no one's assigned to the role.
mm,
So clear assignment of tasks. Who's going to take care of it to avoid I thought you were doing it. I thought you were taking care of that. Follow up. That's an area that often falls through the cracks.
mm,
So if we were to say, kind of low hanging fruit,
yeah,
um, look at those areas like reactivation and appointing a head and follow up of outstanding treatment. Is everybody saying yes to that? Is hygiene maximized? How do you close the gap on openings in hygiene? Why is and one of the common things, and I think this is George's favorite thing is AR these days, right?
right.
We're hearing him talk about why AR is so high. Um, and if I were to sum all of these up, I think the one thing that I'm noticing is lack of systems, lack of processes, lack of documented step by step for team members. So I'm thrown into a role, but I'm not really sure what my responsibility is.
Mm, okay. So that lack of clarity around roles, responsibilities, step-by-step processes is something that I think that all of us struggle with. It's that working on the business rather than working in the business. Everyone's doing the dentistry and just getting people, butts and chairs and coordinating all these things that no one stepped back and said, "Okay, is everyone clear on exactly what they're supposed to do and what is expected of them and how to get that done in the most, efficient way?" And if you've never done that, it's never gonna happen naturally. It's spontaneously, your dental office is not going to be clearly defined roles and systems. And that requires, some amount of work and effort and attention and experience that a lot of people don't have, or they haven't worked in an environment like that, so they don't even know where to begin.
Right. I think if we were to give our listeners just some tips to start off with, there, I think job descriptions. What is it that you want the treatment coordinator to be responsible for? Please let them know.
Mm,
Um, and what do you want somebody that's working on the hygiene side, patient care coordinator, for example? What do you want that person to be doing? What is your expectation of that? And kind of let's take a step back from there and start off with, okay, this is my vision. This is the house that I want to build and I want to live in.
mm,
And then who do I have on my team that's going to help me get there, and what are is each individual role? I think once there's a clear vision and then it's communicated to the team, then it makes it easier for as a team member for me to see, okay, I can totally see where my role is here. I totally understand what I'm responsible for. And then the next step is basically being able to hold team members accountable for that.
Okay,
So
cool.
if we were to kind of sum that up, let's say start with the vision and then give everybody a defined, clear role, and then accountability.
Okay, fantastic. No, this is exactly what I was hoping we'd kind of get down to is the process that you go through when you approach an office and you say, okay, where do we need to change? And some of that change is very high level of the overall picture, the overall goal, the overall structure and systems. And then some of it, I'm sure, is very specific, like we were saying earlier, to what is the limiter? What's the rate limiting factor on this practice? What is holding this practice back from growing, from optimizing, from being more profitable and productive? Um, so I got to think that at some point here, you've encountered teams and people who are resistant to change, who, here comes Suzanne. She's going to tell us what to do. We just got to outlast her. And, we can say the same if we just are stubborn enough for long enough. Uh, how often does that happen, and how do you work with that? How do you get buy-in from people who are just like, "Hey, I don't wanna change. I don't want systems. I don't want clear roles. I don't," they are like, "We're doing okay. Why break it? Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why are we trying to push to some random other level that I don't know what it's about?" How do you work with teams like that?
You know, avoiding that from happening, I think, from the get go is what we described earlier in terms of just does the doctor have a clear vision? Have we communicated that really clearly? And those who really don't see themselves in that picture, I think they end up opting out.
Hmm,
So and then I think the doctor being on board with these changes. Um, you know, having the team buy into certain things, there's a lot to be said for that. I think team members, even new doctors, either joining a practice or purchasing a practice. I mean, things are a little different now, and it has less to do with COVID than it does with this generation of workers. They really want to be taking part. They really want to have to be part of that process. And if we're going to have them stay long term, then having them buy in makes all the difference in the world. So I think the toughest part is um, communicating it in a way where the team sees that this was meant to be. It makes sense. Yes, I'm going to buy in, rather than leaders coming in or even a coach coming in and saying this is the way it's got to be because it's got to be that way just because it's my way.
hmm. So there's two issues here. It's like the doctor, the leader of the team has to be completely bought in themselves, but then they need to bring the team on this journey together rather than patriarchal or hierarchical coming down and saying, here's how it's going to be, let's shape up everybody, you're not doing what you should, so we got to do what we should. Going through a journey together is going to be more effective than a top-down driven approach to this. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Um, the partnership that the coach and the doctor have, both going into this meeting, if it's a team meeting or some kind of communication with the team, going into this as a united front. Looking at it from a partnership approach. Doctors buy in and doctors agreement first, and then we kind of share that with the team. You
Mm,
know, and then really having the team see where they fit into this is your reality now, this is the doctor's vision, here are here's what you're currently doing, what do you see that has to change? And a lot of times they know what the answers are, they just don't know how to make those changes. And status quo is a lot easier, right? We talked about the discomfort of certain changes. So it's a little bit harder to kind of acknowledge, okay, things have to change. Great. I have the how to now. I have what I need to do to connect with patients, or to make phone calls, or work on AR, whatever that may be. And so when you get buy-in from the team, there's a greater chance that they're going to be excited about the process and stay on.
Hmm.
And those who really don't feel comfortable and are, kind of not going to feel comfortable are making a personal decision to kind of make some changes in their own lives as well.
Absolutely. Um, can you think of any examples in the last couple years of a specific system that the team came to the realization of, "We want to do better at X," or the doctor came to a realization of, "Here's what's holding us back." Do you have any specifics? I'm putting you on the spot here of, one thing in particular that, "Okay, we need to change this, we need to make a system out of it, and then we need to set up follow-up and accountability on this." Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think I would say reactivation. We work on the new people coming in. We work on making sure that those we've seen just recently are coming in. But what I feel falls through the cracks, and when their eyes are open to, wow, this huge ratio of patients that maybe you haven't seen in the last 18 months, but you've seen, sometime in the past, um, haven't been in. And statistics show that patients, if they're not appointed ahead, they often delay their appointments, whether that's with your office or join another office. It takes about 2 years before they go to the dentist again. So
Hmm,
if we were going to use that as a benchmark, I come in and kind of look at that ratio and show the team regularly how that KPI is moving, how that ratio is improving. I think it becomes eye opening, and it's one of those feel good things, Richard, for team members, because they kind of go, you know what, we are actually helping patients stay healthy. And I think all that starts to connect for them.
that's really cool. So, it's got reactivation in particular if so you said you tied it to a specific metric, a
Metric.
specific KPI. What was that ratio? Was it length of time between appointments?
The ratio is just the percentage of patients that are not scheduled for a future hygiene appointment. So basically, in a nutshell, overdue, right?
Okay,
What ratio is overdue? And if you're looking at 10 to 20% as a healthy ratio of patients that are overdue, and I mean healthy as an okay ratio,
okay.
um, then anything above that, you start to say, wow, it's pretty eye-opening when I get to a team and I say, which is pretty common when we first start working together, 40 to 50% of the patient base being overdue, and they go, no, that can't be.
Wow,
Right.
okay.
Okay, so this becomes our reality now. How are we going to connect with these patients? And knowing those metrics then helps them make certain decisions, like, okay, if we're going to reactivate these patients, do we have enough hygiene hours, and so on and so on. And then you start to see the practice grow.
That's awesome. So, taking this one particular metric, how much of this is outwards accountability of like, "Hey, I'm following up, I'm asking you," versus are they tracking this internally and bringing this up and reporting this back? Um, how do you maintain this? So say it's like, "Okay, we have identified an issue here, reactivation. We're gonna focus on this as a team. In 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, how often do you see that this begins to slip back to the point where it starts to scale back up? Or is this kind of a self-reinforcing cycle where because they're watching the metric, they see it move, that's satisfying, they wanna continue to improve and maintain their gains.
I think it's the latter. In offices, I see the excitement level increase, and they start to feel like, okay, we're making sure that all these patients are remaining healthy. And so that metric is just decreasing the number of patients, that are, we set a goal, and then how close are we to that goal? And we measure it every month.
Mm.
Now, with this is my prior life, I had other ways to measure this, but with shared practices and our practices that are on practice by numbers, this is an easy thing to track.
Well, and giving your team access to that via practice by numbers so that they can see what you're seeing, and it's not this like, "Oh, okay, I gotta find this click down menu and run some random report," and like, "Oh, we forgot to run the report." It's just on the dashboard, it's tracked, everyone can see it, someone is is bringing this up at the meetings, sharing that with the team and celebrating those successes, that's where metrics-based consulting and coaching can really gain traction and have power to it, where everyone wants everyone's on the same page, everyone's looking at the same thing, and when we have success, we get to celebrate that together, and you don't wanna lose ground, you wanna continue that momentum. So that's for me, that's very exciting to have access to that, and then to be able to coach and build around that, because that's something that is sustainable versus it's this hard push, and after 2 months of 3 months, 6 months of trying to work on this one metric, now all of a sudden it gets lost in the shuffle and it starts to slip again. So, I think there's a lot of power there, and I love that you brought up practice by numbers and what we're building in shared practices, because that gets the team involved on a whole 'nother level. Um, how prior to practice by numbers and shared practices, was this difficult to get the team to see the numbers in the same way that you were seeing it and the dentist was seeing it?
Not necessarily difficult, but I think it becomes a third party actually going in and looking at this. And so, there's a little bit of a no, that can't be kind of approach, right? It's
Mm,
me going in. And so, unless I'm sitting down with someone, whether that's remotely or side by side, whether I'm sitting down with someone and kind of saying, here, look, I'm pulling this report, this is what it shows. Um, there's this is with practice by numbers. This KPI is right there, and it's accessible whether I'm talking on the phone with the client and the team, or they pull it on their own. They can see it in real time, and so they can affect that change. And I think one of the missing pieces that you described is also having the system to continue to work on this regularly. So it's documented. This is a how-to. Becomes part of our practice. This becomes protocol, whether that team member moves away and we have to hire a new team member or not. This is protocol for the practice because they begin to see that this is such an important facet of their growth.
I love that too, the how-to side of things, from Vital Smarts, from Crucial Conversations, and they've got a separate book called Influencer and Change Anything, and then another one, Crucial Accountability. They have this 6, source model of behavior, where there's a whole set of sources that are ability, and there's, another set that are motivation. So, sometimes we assume that people don't do something because they just don't want to do it. It's like if they wanted it bad enough, they would figure it out and they would do the thing that we wanted them to do. If they wanted to have patients reactivated, why can't they just figure this out? Whereas in fact, a lot of times people want to be successful, but they don't have the blueprint of here are the exact steps. And rather than for me personally, I love having exact steps rather than being like demeaning of like, oh, I have to lay out every single step for you. It's empowering where it's like, okay, I don't have to spend all of my mental energy figuring out what's the best way to do this or how should I do this, trial and error. Here's a system. I'm going to follow this system to get these results. And that's where a lot of this work can be done in the building of systems. Do you find that you get pushback from people when you want to document things and create a step-by-step protocol? Is that hard for some people, or is that pretty much universally embraced when people see the power of it?
Well, you mentioned it being difficult because there's no system in place, right? And in dentistry, we struggle with taking care of the patients that are walking out and the just the daily. And so it's not for lack of desire to actually make a change in, let's say, let's use reactivation. And to implement a system, I think it's a time constraint. So if
Mm,
someone comes in and says, hey, this is best practices, this is where we should be, and this tried and true approach has worked, let's try this and see what the outcome is. I think they're grateful just to have some kind of direction and guidance and not have to do the research on their own. So I have found more often than not that people are embracing that part of it because they know that that's a struggle, but they're busy with taking care of the day-to-day stuff that they don't really have time. And if I've come in with a tested approach, then that makes it so much easier for them to just say, great, I can start that today. Let's go.
Yeah. And that validation of here is something that works well, and here is the step by step. Um, I am personally the type that over researches things. It's like I want to, do my homework. I want to start a podcast about practice ownership 5 years before I thought I was going to own a practice. Um, some people say that's crazy. Why would you do that? But that's just my personality type. And I think a lot of people are that way. Is they want to know what's going to work. But that takes a lot of mental energy and effort to figure out the best way, and I run into that often where it's like, "Ugh," like, I don't even know where to start with this thing, and I'm gonna need 5 hours to dive in and research and read blogs and listen to podcasts and all of that, and that's where I see the true power of coaching is a coach has access to a data set of what has worked in multiple offices, in multiple contexts, based on the result that we wanna get, that you just don't have. As a sole practitioner in a single office, you have one set of data, and maybe you've worked in a few other offices, and maybe they did it a few different ways, but you don't have a framework to stand back and evaluate these systems and these protocols and come up with a best practice that works in multiple offices. And that is, for me, also one of the most exciting things about coaching is being able to offer that to our audience and say, here is these systems, here is perspective on what you are trying to achieve and systems that can help you get there. So that's one of the things I'm excited for you to be able to offer to those who work with shared practices in our coaching. Would you So now that let's put this all, a bow on all of this. You've got your experience coaching. We've talked about change specifically within a dental office, and we're building systems. We're building an overall framework. Um, you and George have been working behind the scenes on our philosophies, on our ability to evaluate different practices and practice types versus where they're going. Um, how is this different from what you've done before? And obviously you're gonna get into more specifics on your episode with George and Matt, and we're gonna talk about more of this in the future, but how is the framework that we're building now different than what you've done in the past?
I think this collaboration makes all the difference in the world. It behind the scenes, George and I have been working on the the journey, just how a client starts with us.
Mm,
And I think George has the ability to really work with our doctors and start them off with that vision exercise. And I
mm,
think that combo really is, kind of yielding results with clients even already. Him starting off with working with the doctor with vision. And once we get that all mapped out, then we're kind of creating that treatment plan based on that. Okay, here's where your practice is, here's where it can be. This is what you described. So again, his handoff to me has been so valuable. I've not had the opportunity of working with a doctor who was coaching other doctors and really working on vision. And I think the blend of that is what our clients are really going to benefit from.
awesome. No, that's so exciting. Uh, this is something that I am going to benefit from personally. It's really nice to have access to you and to George, and I all the time will share things with George and Matt and say, "Hey, what do you think of this situation of this scenario?" And we've also learned on our Facebook group from others. But this is putting together a lot of the lessons that from practice underwater, from the coaching that Matt and George have done, coaching that you've done, and making something even better with the combination of metrics and the access that we have to practices. Thank you, Suzanne, for coming on the show. We've got a lot more to come this week. I'm really excited for what we have to offer moving forward, and we've demonstrated that in this episode. Any summaries on affecting change in their office that they can take away and use in their office?
Absolutely. A 5-step approach. When I work with doctors and teams, we work on these 5 areas. We say create, design that vision, map it out, and communicate. So create, communicate to the team so they know what it looks like. Integrate the team, get their buy in for including them in the process. motivate. So these are easy. Okay. I'll repeat them in a second. So motivate, empower the team, positive reinforcement for the team, and then evaluate. And the data is going to tell you if what you're doing is working. So let's kind of sum that up.
Create.
Communicate is number 2.
Create, communicate.
Integrate, motivate, and evaluate.
Okay. Create the vision. We have to communicate and over communicate it. Integrate. Is that
integrate integrate the team, get their buy-in, get them, okay? Then motivate, encourage, right? And then evaluate your results.
Okay. I love it. 5 steps. They all rhyme with 8. So I'm now hungry. I think I'm going to go eat. Thank you, Suzanne, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
We'll talk with you next time. I'm so excited for you all to understand the expertise and the skill set that Suzanne brings to the table here. There's going to be one more episode with Suzanne on Wednesday. Once again, I misspoke in this episode when I said an upcoming George and Matt episode that already aired last Friday. But we're going to have her expertise on pre-ownership content. She looks at practices. She does due diligence, and she's done this for a lot of people and helped in transitions. So from everything that we do in shared practices, Suzanne brings things to the table that we do not have. George and Matt and I, while we look at practices remotely, we've never gone in and vetted a practice internally for someone else. And that's something that Suzanne has done multiple times. So excited to hear her perspective. I'm excited for Wednesday's episode. Really had a good time with Suzanne. And like I said, welcome to the team, Suzanne, and we'll be hearing more from you soon. Take care, you guys. We'll talk to you next time.